Alright, welcome in everybody. Honeyland Tutor coming at you with our second part in the intermediate series. We're going to continue our journey to establish a deep knowledge of our hive by learning as much as we can about the bees that we have, how best to deploy them, which lands and zones to deploy them in, and a few more tips and tricks. As promised, we're going to begin this video by sharing the rewards that were earned by our very special set of bees. Now, if you have an excellent memory or you have just finished rewatching the first video in the intermediate series, you would see, or you would remember, that the Honeyland Tutor account has 3 Zone 7 meadow bees with the same like. This is a very powerful tool, considering that these 3 bees with a like match and, of course, mood match provide each other with significant boosts while performing a mission and remaining on the land together. So let's take a brief look at them. Now, our ASMR Zone 7 meadow bees are exclusively harvesters for a couple of reasons. We're not going to rehash this in great detail, but the fact of the matter is there is not much from my perspective that could make me want to send these bees hunting. Sure, I can think of a couple of scenarios. Most notably, if I were interested in hunting for a high value shard on an extreme land that was a meadow, and perhaps I needed 2 royal jelly shards or 8 royal jelly shards to be able to breed my next queen, that might be something that I would consider sending these nice strong bees to go collect for us. But that's an individual decision, and generally speaking, these bees should be reserved for harvesting. Now, if you recall, as a brief recap, these 3 bees are providing each other, when on a mission, with a 30% boost because of their matching likes, as well as an additional boost because there are going to be 3 angry bees on this harvesting mission. Now we'll go ahead and sort of briefly show this on the 2 Zone 7 meadows, which, as we'll discuss more today, it's really important to understand the land form distribution by zone, because it will increase your ability to deploy your bees more effectively. Now, if you recall, the Zone 7 Meadow number 1 is owned by Zealots himself, and Zone 7 number 2 is not owned. Now, this is an important distinction because the fact that 3886 is owned by Zelix, who's a very active player, means that he is likely going to have his bees on this land most of the day. So really, we can say, generally speaking, that this is a better land to harvest on, because there is not going to be competition from the owner. And if you look at the lands a little bit more closely, you'll see that the hourly production rate for 3861 is considerably higher at 4.4 than the hourly productivity of 3886. So this essentially provides us two reasons to harvest on 3861 as opposed to 3886. Not only are there generally going to be less bees on the land most days, it also produces honey more quickly, which, when there is a reserve of 0, is crucial to ensuring that your bees are able to complete their missions in a timely manner. Now let's sort of jump into the point here. These 3 Zone 7 meadow bees that are exclusively harvesters, they need an anchor for their mission to ensure that we maximize their productivity as our best bees for harvesting. And this is done by sending a 4th bee along with them to Zone 7, regardless of its landform, because we want these 3 bees to finish before our off landform bee, because it will ensure that they get the highest possible haul from their harvest. Now you can see that these 2 bees right here completed their mission prior to this bee, which completed its mission prior to this bee. As discussed on the previous video, these first 2 bees will have a complete harvesting mission with their 30% boosts, because they will have at least 2 other bees. So at all times there will be 3 angry bees when these 2 are harvesting. Now if that's a little bit confusing, please go ahead, check out the first video in this series so that you can get up to speed. So what we're going to do now is we're going to send out these 3 meadow bees, like matched, of course mood matched, without the anchor bee, and I'm going to show you either at the end of or at some point in this video that the yield from our stronger bees is lessened because of the lack of an anchor bee. So we'll just go ahead and take care of that right now. And we don't really even have to think too much about it. Well, we do essentially have to make sure we get the right bee. Right, so now we're just going to click the send button, even though we have room for 2 more bees and 3 more bees available. Just as an experiment, so that I can prove the point that the anchor bee, which would be the bee that we placed in this position, or both anchor bees, which would ensure that all 3 of our power bees got their maximum load. Now this anchor strat, in my opinion, is critical the higher up the experience ladder you go, because when you get to level 25 and above, you are going to be making some complex decisions when deploying your bees. And understanding the interactions between the power bees and the anchor bees is crucial to maximizing your productivity. And of course, given that we are generally speaking looking to optimize, it's good for you to see for yourself, by experimenting with these various methodologies, which one works better for your playstyle. And naturally, I'm not saying that you have to do it this way, but from my experience, this is the best way, and the most common playstyle is aligned with this strategy of trying to maximize the per harvest average yield of each bee. And I will tell you that that is my personal goal. And while I understand that everybody is different, if you hope to maximize the productivity of your bees, the guaranteed worst way to do it is to simply stack capacity and look for big numbers. It is infinitely more efficient and productive to use complementary bees that act as anchors to your power bees, and at some point you will probably be interested in harvesting as opposed to just hunting, breeding, and growing. Right? So there does, as you know, as Corey would tell you, everybody is here to get the hunt. But truly, the smarter you are in your gameplay execution, the faster you will get to receiving higher amounts of rewards. So we'll go ahead and press the send button here. Essentially the primary goal of this video is to provide you with some guidance on how to set up your squads, because a lot of you, I know this, are doing it in pretty binary terms, right? We either have like-matched groups that go out together to the highest zone possible, or we have landform match groups that are designed to complete their missions at around the same time. And of course you do that by either upgrading cosmetically or with items, the agility and capacity and recovery in order to smooth mission times and recovery periods. This all begins with your selection of the mission teams. It's crucial to dig deeply and have a expansive knowledge of all of the facets of gameplay and utilize all of the tools at your disposal. So, of course, I'm not going to just continue to prattle on until these bees finish their mission in, 2.5 hours or so. We're going to continue to press forward. But I can't emphasize enough that your first goal as a new player, of course, should be to learn how the game is played. To not make big mistakes with your assets, when purchasing your assets. And then when you start to become more confident and you decide to either invest or use some honey to grow, as you're gonna need to be able to optimize. All right, so now that we have deployed the bees in our science experiment, we're going to dive back into our hive. Now, if at this point you haven't looked at the first video in the series, Knowing Your Bees, please go check it out, because we're going to build off of that knowledge in order to continue to build out a deep understanding of our hive by diving in to our roster and tinkering with our potential squads. Now, this is going to include using the export hive function from the hive mind, which I do go over in brief in the previous video. So again, please be sure to check that out so you can be up to speed. All right, so here we are in the Honeyland Tutors roster. Again, if you have sort of just paused and gone back to the last video, you can see that I have made some changes to this spreadsheet. That is not a coincidence. I am constantly improving my tools that I make custom on top of the tools that are provided to Honeyland, which of course isn't necessary for everyone. But needless to say, it's our goal here to practice what we preach. So as you can see, there are a couple more elements that have been introduced to the spreadsheet, including the harvesting time calculations. And I did a little bit of subdividing and rearranging of the the base statistics, the qualities and whatnot, in order to be able to have a document that makes more sense to navigate. Now, of course, nobody here is saying that you need to do all this, because this is, as some people would say, is crazy. But if you are inclined and have the technical capabilities, this type of system is going to empower greatly your ability to make strategic decisions that are providing improved results from what you were previously doing. There's simply no other way to say it. So most of you are going to be familiar with the fact that there are halvings in Honeyland, right? The token is deflationary, so this is a fundamental process in the life cycle of a deflationary token. So really, it's crucial to go ahead and wrap our arms around as much honey as possible, because as you might be aware, the scarcity increases, right? So the availability decreases as time goes along. And if you were really curious, you would be able to see on the blockchain that Honeyland tokens are being burned regularly. And it's fine, there's lots of decimals, so we'll be able to continue to subdivide the tokens, and everyone will be able to still acquire them. But the fact of the matter is, the more that you can get out, the more you'll have later. So, with that said, what we're going to do is we're going to try to build some intuitive groups based on just the information that we have at our fingertips. Now, the Honeyland Tutors account is a bit unique. Of course, it only has 3 landforms, and it doesn't have any bees that go to a zone less than 3, which is great. But I understand that not necessarily everyone can get to this point very quickly, but the point here is to emphasize that the more calculated you are in your hive building decision making, the easier it is going to be in the future once you have a more significant size of hive. Again, my goal with this spreadsheet is to make visualizing possible, and not to say that it is impossible otherwise. We can, with very small amount of effort, look at our roster when it's in such a format and have intuitive squads that are at our fingertips. Now the real question comes in: how many bees do we send, and which landform do we choose? Well, of course, the answer is going to be pretty straightforward. It depends. Which group of bees are we talking about? In this case, we have 3 woodlands, 2 no specialties, and a meadow bee. It's likely that we are going to send this group to a zone 3 woodland. And there's a number of reasons for that. A, as discussed, the more bees you have on a mission, the more bees complete the mission with the maximum boost. And this scales up. The maximum boost is for 3 bees that match each other. However, the only requirement to receive that 30% boost is having more than 3 bees. So if you, for example, are sending out 5 bees, the first second and third bees to complete their mission will have their full 30% boost for the entire duration. The boost will then, when there are only 2 bees on the mission, drop off, and then again, when it's the single bee on the land, the boost will drop even further. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make it even easier to look at all of these groups one at a time. And that is where the formatting and organization comes into play. If you were interested, we could say, right, we want just to see our zone 3Bs. So what we would do, we would simply change the endurance to show us only a maximum of 154 and change, right? Anything over 154.9999 will be a zone 4B, and it likely won't be a good idea to send that zone 4B to zone 3. There are exceptions to this rule, and they vary based on the number of like-matched bees that can go to the next zone. Now, we're not going to dive too deeply into that, because that is, in my opinion, that's going to be beyond the intermediate level. There aren't going to be too many intermediate players who are having to decide whether they should send their zone 4B, that is the 4th like match, to a zone 3 land with the other 3 like match bees, instead of sending the zone 4 like match to another land in zone 4 without a like match. And the quick answer is that's because the zone 4B will be getting a 30% boost in zone 3 with its like match buddies, and it'll only be losing 15% from being in zone 3 instead of zone 4, right? So the math there is actually pretty straightforward. It's better to send that 1B to zone 3 with its 3 like matches than it is to send it to zone 4 with no like matches. But again, that will be something that we cover even further down the road, because, as mentioned, there aren't too many folks with 4 like-matched bees that 3 of go to one zone and the 4th one goes to a higher zone. So it's a lovely problem to have, and hopefully you'll have it soon. Now, as you can see, the only 3x like match that looks anything remotely reasonable to send to the same land are our ASMR bees, right? We do happen to have another like that has 3 bees, but as I just briefly described, this board game's bee going to zone 7 is much more than a 30% boost that it would get from being in zone 3 with the other 2 board games. And that is compounded by the fact that you have another bee, right, that is taking a 15% penalty for going to zone 3. So really, under no circumstances is it appropriate to send this zone 7 bee out with these 2 like matches, particularly if we're a fairly standard intermediate player. And that's because it's highly unlikely that we have a zone 7 land that we own that we can send all 3 of our bees to ensure that our power bee gets his just haul, right? Because that's really what we want. We want our most powerful bees to bring back the maximum amount in this case, since we're discussing harvesting, honey. In my opinion, the earlier you begin to look at light matching, zone matching, the better off you'll be down the road. Because landform matching is very important, to be sure. However, from my experience, there are going to be paradises which applies the landform boost to all bees on a lot of lands moving forward. Which is, that's really not a problem. It actually makes it a little easier. And from my perspective, focusing on landform matches exclusively is not the most productive methodology for deploying your bees. It really requires a hybrid approach of strategically matching zone with like. Now, if you have no good options, obviously the landform match is the next best option. Certainly, if you had a choice, you would want to send like match, mood match, and landform matching bees. But for someone to focus on any one of those things too much is detrimental. Particularly in the beginning, where most of our players are not diving in with huge budgets so that they can cherry pick the perfect bees. Some people do. Of course, they're more productive. I mean, their cost base is higher. It simply makes sense. However, if you want to essentially have the highest profit margin, right, if that's something that's important to you, then you will at all points in your Honeyland hive building process be both tactical and strategic. And hopefully that makes sense. So we'll briefly recap what we think is the most important factors that should go into deciding which bees to send to which lands in what groups. And I will tell you that this is no easy feat without the proper tools. At the beginning of the next video, we'll show you what the rewards look like for this improved squad, the version 2 of the squad that we sent out from the previous video. We'll sort of keep showing how their rewards increase and change as you increase is a general statement there. As you continue to progress, likely your yields will increase, but in some cases you may be trading off a very slight amount of capacity for a little bit more individual efficiency from a non-triple-double bee, right? Which, and generally speaking, you want to cater to, you want to tend to your most powerful bees and ensure that they are the ones that are spending their entire missions with the 30% boost to at least their mood. Which means that in the case of 3 like-matched bees, you have to have 2 anchors to ensure that all 3 of them complete their mission with the 30% boost. Now, if that feels like a lot, it is. I also just said that I'm not going to be doing that in this case. I'm going to be using the other meadow power bee in favor of the second anchor bee, and that's because of the overall efficiency. Alright, so here we are, back on our two favorite lands, our Zone 7 meadows. This is unfortunate. This happened live in front of your eyes. It went from a number of bees that was acceptable to a number of bees that is no longer acceptable. And you're going to get a sort of free piece of advice here. Cancel these bees. You wait 5 minutes, then you send out those bees to another land. That's all I'm going to say about that. If you're playing actively, you catch that every time. There is a difference of perhaps up to 10 hours in the mission time, depending on how powerful the other bees are, and if more bees that are also powerful get sent between the time that your bees finish. This is tactical as opposed to strategic. This type of active gameplay, as you just sort of saw, is something that will save you. I guess it doesn't really save you anything except for time, but what it does is in the long run, it gets you more honey because your bees are going to be able to go out on more missions. I'm not saying that you should, every harvesting mission, check back to make sure that you haven't had 10 extra bees in addition to the 10 that you were aware of that are now competing with you on your target land. So with that said, we'll wait the 5 minutes. Alright, welcome back. Our bees have exited the trap. That was a trap. Admiral Akbar, it's a trap. So what we're going to do now, a bit unfortunate, but it is what we're going to have to do, is we're going to have to find a different land. Now, this is doubly unfortunate because of the nature of our triple-double group. Right, our ASMR Zone 7 Meadow bees really want to go to Zone 7 Meadow. However, we can make whatever Zone 7 land we want good enough to be a meadow, right? We can use the Paradise Maker this one time, and perhaps it'll last long enough for us to use twice, depending on what rarity we use. And then tomorrow we can come back to the Zone 7 meadow. We can save our Paradise Maker shards. This is, however, an excellent opportunity for me to transition into one of the other topics that is critical when we're talking about tactical active gameplay. Knowing the land, the distributions by zone of the various landforms, as well as the owners or lack thereof, will provide us with a crucial step up but in particular when we come to this situation where we're thrown for a loop out of our routine off of our favorite lands. Now, my personal strategy is to target lands with no owner, right? That just feels like it makes sense. Not only are they not going to, they who doesn't exist, not going to be sending their bees to their land, there is also nobody that can come behind us and clean the land, and perhaps even really ruin our day and put down a mythic cursed honey or a mythic poison bomb, right? Something that would truly impair the productivity of our bees. There happens to be one right here. Now we can, if we so choose, and we will, just to keep this brief, we will send our power squad here and we will put a paradise maker on this land. Now, if I were playing my account and I were sending a full allocation of bees, I might even put a mythic poison bomb on this land when I put the paradise maker down, because nobody will come behind me, and I will certainly be able to use it a couple of times during the 14-hour duration of the poison bomb and the 12-hour duration of a rare paradise maker. Again, this is a topic of a future video. However, this was an excellent opportunity to briefly introduce that point. Unfortunate. Thankfully, we can improvise. Now, in this example, we were unfortunately out of Paradise Maker shards. However, given the good faith nature of the relationship between myself and the team, in order to prove my point, we're going to carry on. Right? Magic. The crucial bees are, of course, our ASMR squad. Now, really what we want to do is we want to find the bees that will finish slower than this group. However, I can tell you that this bee is a very slow harvester, and it will be more of a pain to try to find the perfect group than it will be to just accept the fact that this bee, which is a slow harvester, might not have its full 30% boosts for its entire mission. It may be the last bee on the land. But given that we've had to be adaptable, considering that Zone 7 meadows were not available to us today, in this exception to the rule, really what we're going to do is just pick the highest capacity bees, because that really is what's going to maximize the yield for most players. But most players are going to be more interested in maximizing the per run average harvest of their bees. Whether or not you agree with me, hunting is the best way to grow, and the only way that you can consistently hunt is if you're running a positive harvest balance, or you're depositing honey, and that's not necessarily possible for everyone. The earlier you get started in these efficient use of your hive, and the more extensive your knowledge of your bees, your roster is, then the more natural it's going to be, the easier it's going to be. And of course, as I said, and I'll repeat this now because it's very important, Easier is often a word that is misunderstood. Easier doesn't mean less challenging necessarily. In many cases, it means that you're getting better. So what we want to do is make our lives easier. We want to make it easier for us to get more honey. We want to be able to sustain our growth on less lands harvesting, which will allow us to spend more land slots hunting and growing organically. Our original plan was to send to the Zone 7 meadow, but as that was unavailable, we're going to take the next best option, which is to send all of our best bees out together and use what would have been the anchor bee to get at least 2 honeypots in the time that these bees are running their mission. So while it may seem like we have a problem because our triple-double ASMR bee is not going to get its full haul, it's okay because we have introduced another strong bee and we will be getting some honeypots. Honeypots are really what we want. Obviously, at the end of the day, we want honey, but honeypots get us honey more effectively than purely harvesting. I promise. So let's go ahead and send these bees out so that we can see with our own eyes during the next video that we received a significantly higher total haul as well as 2 honeypots. And we only really were able to make this decision after we knew our new bees. Because if you go back to video number 1, Knowing Your Bees in the Intermediate series, you'll note that the spreadsheet that I show you has 25 bees on it. We added 5 more bees. That's an increase of 20%. If our hive increases by 20%, we don't know it anymore. Probably less than that, right? If your hive increases by 10%, right? If you add, let's say that you got 25 bees, you add 3 new bees, you have changed the interactions so significantly that you just need to spend a little bit of time looking through the way that you might potentially have to change your deployment routine. Not only is that going to help you on a routine day, but it's going to help you when you get a monkey wrench thrown in your gears. Because you'll be able to say, oh, okay, well, we're now in scenario number 2, where it doesn't necessarily make sense to only care about the triple doublers. Now we have an extra bee, and it's actually much more effective to send out the new bee with the old squad. Really, if we're playing the way that most players are, we're only going to send these 5 bees out harvesting 2 or 3 times a day. So if what we do is stay tunnel vision on our initial goal, we'll be giving away a lot of honey. Truly, the fact that we spent just a couple of moments looking through our hive after we added our new bees allowed us to make this decision that is going to provide us with a lot more honey over the long term. And in this case, the difference between 320 capacity and 365 capacity over the next 2 years is going to add up to be a great sum. And we have that power to show you the evidence of that using this type of repetitive experimentation, right? We know that this is the base of our Power B squad. Now it's our job to figure out what the best complementary bees are. It's also our job to be prepared for when we get hit in the face, right? Okay, this has changed. Now it's important for us to actually maximize the overall total of the haul rather than just the powerful triple-double core squad, right? So at the end of the day, each hive keeper is going to have to, based on their unique and developing hive, be strategic about the squad formation and the deployment by zone and landform. The deeper and more expansive your knowledge of the interactions between your bees, the better off you're going to be in the long term, because the more prepared you're going to be to adapt to the competitiveness as it increases. And furthermore, when Universe 2 opens and essentially we're all on a clean slate, obviously some folks will start with more resources than others, and I'm not necessarily talking about just the older players. There will be folks that come in with a great amount of resources on day one of Universe 2 that have not played in Universe 1 at all. And while they will have technically a resource advantage over many of us, your ability to think quickly because of your extensive knowledge of your roster will give you the ability to A, be more productive than them, B, beat them when you're competing with them, and C, of course, the most important thing of all, grow your hive very quickly during the honey rush. I mean, that's what I'm most excited about. Couldn't tell you how excited I am. That's what I'm most excited about. The opportunity to start over at square one with the knowledge that I've built over the past couple of years is truly an exciting prospect. I know many of you feel the same way as well. The excitement level for Universe 2 has been building for quite some time. However, now, we're getting close. U2, Q3. And now is when, if you aren't already, you need to get good. With that, we'll go ahead and wrap this video up. When we come back for the next video in the series, we'll continue to compare how our primary squad is becoming more or less productive as we switch out the components, we change the lands that they hunt on, and ultimately try to maximize the average harvest yield on a per bee basis. Again, not everyone necessarily shares this goal, but from my experience, it's the best avenue to pursue, particularly as someone who is looking for explosive organic growth. Now, we'll sort of have this burned in your memory for when we return. And we'll continue to monitor and perhaps even apply some strategic upgrades in order to really smooth out the mission time and capture the most yield, which will, of course, give us the ability to grow our hives and continue to thrive. I would, of course, encourage you to join us in the Honeyland Discord. I'm Penguinito. I would be happy to discuss anything that we have gone over in any of my videos, or just sort of chat you up about how you are feeling about your hive and your productivity. So with that, we'll wish you a hearty zub zub. I hope you have had a nice summer so far for those of you in the northern hemisphere, and an excellent winter so far for those of you in the southern hemisphere. Thank y'all very much for joining us. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.